Welcome to Consider This, where thoughts and conversations come together. My name is Barry Wright. I'm the director of the Niagara Community Observatory. We're going to be talking about post-secondary education and how important that is, especially today in our knowledge economy as we're moving forward, and how important that our youth of today really have that foundation to be able to have the skill set for tomorrow. Yet, and the challenge here in Niagara is that perhaps we're not where we need to be, and our numbers indicate that we might not have as many of our youth going to post-secondary education as other areas as well. And so joining me today, we have Kate Cassidy, is the Director of Youth University here at Brock University. And we have Cindy Paskey, and she's the Executive Director with the Education Foundation of Niagara. Perhaps maybe to get started in our conversation, I'll ask Kate a little bit if you could talk a little bit about what Youth University does and how this ties in nicely to our topic of our conversation today.
Sure, Barry. Youth University is an initiative of Brock University, and we help youth establish a foundation for success in the 21st century. And to us, what that means is that all youth should have an understanding of post-secondary, to feel comfortable on a post-secondary campus, and to see where that could fit with where their goals are. I know that in contemporary times, the pace of change is so fast that people are going to have to learn throughout their lifetime. And so I think an important part of equity for everyone and flourishing for a community is that people feel comfortable within a post-secondary environment. So that's what we do. What that actually means is that it translates to after-school programs, summer programs, tutoring, post-secondary awareness programs, and we work with both elementary and high school students.
Great, to get them on campus so it's not a scary place per se.
Mm-hmm.
Right, perfect. They're more comfortable being there. Great, thanks, Kate. Now, Cindy, can you talk a little bit about your organization?
Sure, thank you, Barry. I work for the Education Foundation of Niagara, and we are a registered charity that supports students and programs within the District School Board of Niagara in areas where government funding or budget funding isn't available. So much of what we do is we focus on students who experience financial need, and we respond to that with a very quick response, very quick turnaround, and help students. We also assist with funding programs and services that are innovative, and again, which helps students. And we offer scholarships and bursaries to students of the District School Board of Niagara.
So primarily at within the K-12 range, or would bursaries also help them go to post-secondary education?
The bursaries are to go to post-secondary education, yes.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah.
All right, super. Well, thank you. Well, Kate, I know you've done some research specifically on Niagara, and so perhaps you could talk about the Niagara Story as it relates to that. Thank you.
Yeah. A few years ago, I was reading about the statistics in Niagara, and I was surprised to see that we have such a high percentage who haven't gone on to post-secondary at all. In fact, 41% of the working age population have no post-secondary, and that's over 90,000 people. And I was also really struck by the fact that our college is slightly higher than Ontario and on par with Canada, but those who have gone on to university, we are significantly below the provincial and the national average with that. 18% of the working age population have a university degree, and that compares to in Ontario 29%. So that's a significant 11% spread between us and Ontario, which said to me there's people with potential that aren't seeing that as an option for them. So that was the groundwork that got me interested in this topic. And so what I did is I went out and talked to those who would be typically underrepresented in university. And so the research has found that those with Aboriginal heritage, those with learning disabilities, coming from a rural area, and you would know about this, Cindy, those coming from a lower income background, they are not equally represented in university and in post-secondary in general. So I talked to people from those groups to just get a better sense of what are the stories behind that? How do you understand post-secondary? What challenges do you see? What barriers do you see? And interestingly, what they said parallels what is the newest stuff coming out in the Canadian research, in that definitely the cost of university and the cost of post-secondary is significant, But before that becomes really relevant, it's more about the desire and the readiness for going on. And so I heard a lot of stories around just not thinking that it's something that would be a potential. A lot of people from this area have more of a history in manufacturing where it was possible to have a job without going on to post-secondary. They know that now that might not be the case, and so for their children they have this desire, but it's something they just don't know as much about. So I found, although everybody told very distinctive stories, I found 4 themes in what they said. A number of them play into the idea of desire, and that was feeling a sense of belonging within formal education, having their aspirations, that it's clear what you want to be, so you then know what educational pathway you want. A third was just not having either accurate information about college and university and apprenticeships, or having bias or misconceptions about it. And the fourth that I found was the choice in grade 9 to choose between academic or applied, that had an influence.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, Kate, when you talk about not knowing what you want to be. The research shows that around the age of 10, children start thinking about, well, what is it that I want to be when I grow up? So really, that's part of the solution in terms of when should we be talking to our youth and children about their post-secondary aspirations. Start early. Yeah.
It's interesting when you mentioned that, and just having my children that are in the education system now, and it was interesting, they have a little exercise that they came home with, and it was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so there, it sounds like the school boards are doing some sort of that dreaming aspect, but perhaps their dreams aren't broad enough, or they don't consider that. Because I think you found, Kate, with your research about, who is the strongest influence on people's dreams, and that was parental dreams.
Yeah, what they're actually finding is that parental education is the most associated with what level of education that you're likely to aspire to. So those who have parents with no post-secondary, then the cycle is likely to continue. Those who are have college, they're more likely to choose college or not choose post-secondary. And those who have parents who've gone to university, well, that's most likely what they're going to choose to do too. So I talked to young people, parents, service providers, and talking about aspirations. It's interesting. Definitely, they tended to mirror what their parents were thinking, but they also talked a lot about, I think, adolescence. And you bring up the age point. I think adolescence is a tough time because you are comparing yourself to others, and so you hit that time where it's important to start making those choices that have influence on post-secondary, but you're also comparing how you fit in a classroom. And so if you're not necessarily the top in terms of marks, where you may perceive, well, that's clear, they're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, but what am I going to be? And they said that especially in Niagara, they found it difficult to know, difficult to see role models that or something specific that they would aspire to. They said, if I don't want to be something traditional, and I know I can't be in manufacturing, and I don't want to be in tourism or in the wine industry, I'm not sure what it is that I should be aspiring to. And that certainly parallels also with the larger research that says that all young people right now are really having a tough time because, jobs that never existed are popping up, jobs that used to exist are changing, post-secondary requirements for jobs are changing. Manufacturing is becoming highly value added, where post-secondary is becoming necessary. So much is changing, and I think it's tough for kids to really be able to see themselves if it's not clear to them where they fit.
How are your conversations when you're chatting with the youth of Niagara? Similar kind of?
Oh yes. It's a challenge for young people to determine so early on in their lives where they want to go. Increasingly, I observe that there's the understanding that post-secondary education of some sort will add value, but there are many dilemmas that people face. And it's interesting too, Kate, with the comment you made about family education. And yes, the research does show that that frames how children will think about post-secondary education. But that's not to say that many families don't want their children to go to post-secondary. Many do, but they're not certain about how to get there because they can't relate from a personal experience. So it's the whole concept of, well, how do we navigate the system?
Mm-hmm.
How do we know what we need to know? And programs like you have here at Brock University with the early introduction of the options that are available, those are wonderful. And they really help students. And I know you're aware of the program that we have through the District School Board of Niagara. We have the DSBN Academy. And that academy specifically is designed to offer first-generation students the opportunity of going to post-secondary school, whether it's university or college. And the whole curriculum is around preparing students for post-secondary education. So that is truly a Niagara initiative. It's the first of its kind in Canada, and something else that as a community we can be proud of and support. So it's wonderful that we have this partnership with Youth University and Brock University.
So
Yeah.
I really like that navigation point though that you're making. So so it looks like there's some nice transition models in place. But if you're a parent and you may not know exactly how to navigate, so if we're in there, where would you say would be a good place to start? Where would the first phone call, or is Youth University get your 9-year-old involved in the programs, or what's through the DSBN, or how would they navigate? Who would they call?
Sure. Well, in terms of the DSBN, anybody interested in the Academy, of course, we have a website, so you would Google DSBN Academy. There's an open house that is held in January, and there's an application process also for students. And another really important component of the program there is that parents are engaged in the program and the curriculum. So there's a requirement for parents to contribute some volunteer time to the school and to the development of students. So that's an option for finding out more about the Academy. And of course, there are many programs and services throughout the entire Niagara region that work to support children. So there are more things than just navigational issues. It's exposing our youth to all of the opportunities that are available in our community. And for a lot of families, finances are a challenge. So at the Education Foundation, we look to level the playing field for students who don't have those financial resources. And we help fund things like school trips, field trips, experiential hands-on learning. And we also partner with community service providers. For example, the Canadian Federation of University Women and Brock University offer some of our students the chance to see theater programs, and the students who attend those wouldn't normally be exposed. So there are many small things that that people can do as well. Yeah. How about you, Kate?
I've got a couple things to say about that. Before I forget, I think an important connection to the research and what you just said is that whereas it was thought at one point that income was the most direct connector to going on a post-secondary, it's now understood to be more about, as I was saying, parental education. And they're saying that, what does that represent really? Well, they're saying that's a number of interdependent and complex factors that play out throughout a child's entire youth. You know, so some of the things that they're speculating is that has to do with assistance with homework, being able to access after-school programs, going to museums, having access to computers. So much that's outside of the direct school's influence. So that's great that you're bringing that up. The different supports that people can get to help level that playing field young enough so that the options remain open through schooling. So that was one thing I wanted to say. As it pertains to Youth University, certainly we offer programs for kids starting at grade 3. So there's opportunities for kids to come here from grade 3 up through high school. And we focus a lot on what we try and do is find kids where they're at. So we offer a large variety of different programs.
Yeah.
So we might have spa science, game design, so things that kids could relate to, but then we help them see how that's then connected to science, to math, to English, so that they can see things that they care about, how that connects to school, and how that might connect to what they might do in the future.
Yeah.
Another resource is we've developed a website, findyourpath.ca. So Youth University sponsors that website and it's directed, as far as I know, one of the only in Canada that is directed at more middle school youth. So it does have resources there for both parents and kids to go through, and helps them think about what interests me, what talents do I have. A lot of kids don't realize that, they might not be great at school, but they are really good with people. Or they are really good at home in helping with finances at home. And talking to some of the participants in my research that came from a lower income background, what really struck me is how much the children often will help and be essential to the functioning of the home. And such skills are being developed in doing that. And often they don't realize that that is a really valuable skill set that they bring to it. So I think that there's a lot of different things there, and I also think a lot of parents don't know that college and university are very open to have visitors. The recruitment offices can help, even at young age, to have a tour. And when we bring kids here and they get to go into a lecture hall or see the cafeteria, it's amazing to them what that is, and they're so inspired by that.
Sure.
And
How exciting.
Yeah, and we connect them with university students who often have similar backgrounds to them, so they think, this person could do it, maybe I can do it, this is where they're studying. When they were my age, they liked art, but now they're in video game design. And so they can see how that starts to put things together.
Sure, and that speaks to the role modeling and the mentoring and how important that can be to kids too when they're thinking about their future. Yeah.
I was wondering, I know that it came up a little bit about the concept of the streaming a little bit in your research. You mentioned a bit again about the applied versus, if you will, the academic streaming. And I know there's some key decisions that are often made around grade 9 and thoughts about that.
Yeah, it was, this is something that came up in across the board from youth, from parents, from service providers as being an issue that they saw in really narrowing possibilities. Some of the research that's coming out shows that although choosing academic or applied is not intended to directly influence your course of action, it's really meant to be more about what is each child's needs, what are their learning styles. What they have found is that if you take a number of courses that are applied in grade 9, you are more likely to not graduate high school, you're more likely to take longer to graduate, and you're more likely to not go on to post-secondary. And so when they look at those in the highest income categories versus the lowest income categories, they tend to be, lower income categories tend to be overrepresented in applied. So that's obviously not what the intent of that was. And when I heard the individual stories in my research, I said, people told us about it, but I didn't really realize how much that would influence what I could do later. It just didn't, the information's there, but it just didn't hit them as being so significant. And I remember another girl told me, she said, if in my experience, if people had 70s when they were in grade 8, they tend to think, it's going to be too hard, so I'll just choose the option that's going to be easier, and that makes a lot of sense in the context of which they're operating. And so I don't think it's meant to be, though, this is the easier route and this is the more difficult route. And I think something has to happen there. I know it's being sort of reviewed internationally, this idea of, even though this isn't exactly streaming, it does have that tendency towards it. It's a young age, it's 13, 14, and you aren't necessarily recognizing the implications of choice. That said, for some people, that is exactly the right thing for them to do. So I think what it all comes down to, and in many of these topics, is how can we get personalized attention to each person.
Right.
And things like the DSBN Academy does have the opportunity to figure out each child's story and provide the right information and the right supports
Right.
for each child, you know. And so I think for our community, it's really the answer is in a multi-pronged approach. So some kids are going to be addressed perfectly in one way. Some kids, if they just come visit a university or college, it's going to work for them. Some kids are going to see a job and just know it's for them, and others are going to struggle. And how can we help all of them?
Yeah, another thing that's interesting too is the whole notion about once you're transitioning from secondary to post-secondary, it can be very overwhelming. So programs that orient students to the post-secondary situation are very helpful, and then supports that help them while they're here at university or college are also very helpful. And for students who are first generation and perhaps from lower income families, another very overwhelming component is the financial situation. You can get loans for accommodations, you can get loans for your school program, but the investment that's required in terms of laptops and transportation and school supplies and books and so on is for some families a very overwhelming component. And again, that's where the Education Foundation of Niagara comes in, because we are attempting to help our students through that transition. So when I spoke of bursaries, it wasn't only for post-secondary education per se, but also to help facilitate that transition from secondary to post-secondary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So when we look at the barriers, I was just going to say, we talked about several of the barriers, and it looks like there's some options, you know, to be able to find out. Are there other things that you found that were challenging for particular Niagara individuals, and then what are the doors that they can open to get through that?
Well, I'll throw out a couple of different ideas on that one. So just returning back to the aspirations thing, I think there's some great programs. I think it's Job Route. I know you're associated with it, that helps younger kids realize the different emerging sectors in Niagara. So I think that's excellent, letting kids know you might not see these jobs right now, but this is what's coming. So I think that's excellent in terms of aspiration points, seeing things in Niagara that they can imagine themselves in.
Right.
Another one that we haven't touched on as much is that I think is interesting is sense of belonging within education. And it's such an elusive topic, but research has really shown that if you don't have that, like, everyone wants to feel like they belong and that they're valuable.
Yes.
And that they have something to contribute. And we know that, but when we're concentrating on content, sometimes the time for that isn't there. And so I really, something that really strikes me is the importance of finding ways to have every child feel a sense of belonging within formal education. And, you know, that can mean things like after-school sports or clubs, or I've met kids that their teachers have started a guitar club that they stay with. It's making a meaningful connection to somebody within the school and feeling that when I'm at school, there is something that I am good at. And some of the stories that I heard when I talked to the participants in my research it really struck me. There was one child who, he was, I think, 10 or 11 and starting to realize that he was different than others. He had a learning disability, and he was saying, well, what do people like me do when they grow up? Like, he was recognizing this difference, and clearly that sense of belonging is going to be a challenge for him there. So I think different, and a lot's happening within education in terms of different approaches and project-based learning and hands-on learning. But I think really recognizing that some people really struggle with that sense of connection. And we just, connecting to another point you made, Cindy, this summer we piloted a program for high school students where we purposely addressed kids who would experience barriers to post-secondary. So we worked with the school boards to identify those kids, and we brought 35 of them on campus for 2 weeks. And it was just so interesting to watch the evolution for them, realizing like, oh, this is somewhere I can be. And like somebody in my research said, well, at college, you learn how to get a job, but at university you just get information. Or well, I know at college, I get a job and I'll make $120,000 when I get out, but university, I don't know what math degree. What would I do with that?
Right.
So they came and they saw, oh, things are very hands-on here. I can do service learning. I can do a co-op. I can be very involved in recreation. So seeing that there's so many different sides to university, I think is really important in terms of a barrier.
Yeah, and speaking personally, of course, I went through the university system and it's changed, right? It's changed over the last, I don't know how many years, 15, 20 years, so that there are more of those hands-on co-op experiences, experiential learning, and that adds so much value to students' education. I actually have a son here at Brock University, and he participates in a co-op program, and it has been great learning experience for him to couple that with his academic experience. Yeah.
And if you don't necessarily find yourself within a course, well, there's a place to also find yourself and have that connection. Yeah.
Well, I like the concept of the expanded classroom in some respects, and so it's not just about what the learning can take place in the formal classroom, or they're in the school system or university or colleges, but it's that expanded, and so through clubs and other opportunities. And things along that line. So maybe from the school, do we find there are all those, or as many extracurricular activities?
Oh, I would say definitely there are. There are a lot of really committed teachers within the system who go above and beyond and do their absolute best to help students find out what their passion is and to be engaged and involved in other activities. Yeah.
So if you were a parent again, what was the best way if your child's not coming home and telling you about the guitar club or the math club or something?
Maintain the connection with the school. Yeah, and really that's something that comes from the parents' initiative as opposed to the child. And speaking from experience, I know you can't expect your child to bring home all the notes or to tell you everything that's going on at school. So there are much parents can do to stay involved with the school community, and certainly schools offer those options for parents. Yeah. I did want to touch on one other item, and it's the difference that very small things can make. So once again, coming back to our foundation, we provide supports for student needs where other financing isn't available. For example, I had a call the other day, and a teacher had two students who were going out on co-op and had looked around the community. Those students needed steel-toed work boots, and there were none available. Those students didn't have the resources to purchase them, so our foundation was able to provide the funding. And we have many community partners, and really this is my pitch, to encourage people to partner with us. We have optometrists who provide eye care for families who can't afford them. We have all sorts of partnerships, and so if anybody is interested in doing that, partnering with us so that we can help give the students what they need when they're still in their early formative years, that's really helpful as well. Yeah.
So it really is a community endeavor.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's all of us together. And there are many things that everybody can do, whether it's volunteering, partnering, helping to support financially, and becoming informed. What are the issues and what can we do to help?
Well, maybe just as we wrap up our conversation, I'll maybe ask Kate first if there, just to summarize some of the thoughts, or if there one more point that you'd like to make, please feel free to do that.
I guess the thing I really want to emphasize, and it really connects to what you say, Cindy, is the importance of this being something that's addressed early. And so many people I talk to don't realize that. They think, oh, this is something I'll get to in grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. And it's just really too late for us to ensure the equity of post-secondary options for all people. And so I think if people were to realize how young those decisions are made, a major study came out a few years ago that showed that 80% of young people have already made the decision by grade 10, and 40% have say, I always knew. So if they always knew they're getting senses from their whole youth that are leaning them one way or the other. So I think if everybody knew how important it is to address it early, we would be putting the adequate resources towards community groups, towards education, towards these services that we need to make sure, employment, community flourishing, everything is so dependent on education.
Yes. Yeah.
And education is dependent on getting to people early.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cindy,
And for
same
me,
thoughts?
I would say the message is think about what youth are hearing. What are the expectations that are being communicated to them? What are the cultural values that are being passed along to them? What are they hearing about the importance of post-secondary education and how it facilitates a better life, not only in terms of higher levels of income, but also health and well-being. There are positive correlations. And so messaging to our youth, pay attention and focus on that is what I would suggest. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Cindy Paskey, who's the Executive Director with the Education Foundation of Niagara, and Dr. Kate Cassidy, who is with Youth University here at Brock University. I want to thank you both for joining us today with our partnership with Brock University and Niagara Connects to bring stories to the Niagara community. And so this is, consider this, and this is one of our numerous podcasts that are being produced by Brock University. And we invite you to look for more of us on either iTunes or you can Google Brock News and you can see some of our podcasts. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.